for all the new people that are just joining us here in the House, I can assure you that there's been years and years where the Liberal Party has talked about their plans. They've talked about their communications. They've talked about all these grandiose things they're going to do. And yet they never deliver it. And I have to laugh when I hear new members come into this House and say, we have got to fix this problem. Yeah, you're right. It's the problem you guys created.
Boy, oh boy, week 2 in the House of Commons is not looking any better for the Liberals. So let's get into it. So yesterday was kind of a big day since Mark Carney met with all the First Ministers in Saskatoon. This whole meeting was about nation-building projects, national unity, all that fun stuff. And a lot of the Atlantic provinces or the ministers there came out with a positive outlook. You had Doug Ford calling Mark Carney Santa Claus or comparing him to Santa Claus.
This has been the best meeting we've had in 10 years. Simple. Best meeting I've had in 7 years. And there was no expectations that the Prime Minister was going to come out and say, you get that project, you get that project. It was a great discussion. Now, we were all talking. Now it's time to put it into action. All of us are responsible. But I thought it was an incredible meeting, great communication, great collaboration, and we all walked out of that room united. I described him today as Santa Claus. He's coming, and his sled was full of all sorts of stuff. Now he's taking off back to the North Pole. He's going to sort it out, and then he's going to call us.
Now, surprisingly, even Danielle Smith said it was encouraging to hear Mark Carney talk about a Northwestern pipeline, but she did emphasize that talking about a pipeline and implementing a pipeline are two vastly different things.
So I think the Prime Minister still has some work to do, especially with the 9 policies that we know are creating that uncertainty in the investment climate. But I think today there clearly was a spirit of wanting to cooperate, not only among the premiers, but also with the Prime Minister. So I'm encouraged by that.
You tied this to national unity, though,
yeah.
Right? And with what is, you've talked about a process that could lead very well to a referendum in your province next year. In terms of like satisfying some of those concerns, the bigger concerns that could fuel this separatist sentiment amongst a certain part of your population, does this deal with it a bit?
It's necessary but not sufficient. I mean, the encouraging words are one thing, the commitment to looking at these projects, the commitment from the Prime Minister to being an energy superpower and wanting to get that pipeline built are all very positive. But I think we will know once we see the legislation that comes out and once we see how quickly he's able to move on making some of the changes that we need.
But even on the CBC, people are starting to realize that Mark Carney's not really good with keeping up on his word. He says a lot of things, but he doesn't actually act upon them.
So it's not clear to me exactly how much money Mr. Carney's prepared to put on the table for any individual project. But I think he is a strong believer in the idea that, if you build the framework for it, it will come, right?
Yeah,
not that if he's not in the business of building the field of dreams or the pipeline of dreams. I don't think.
And I think that's how a lot of us Canadians are going to have to just accept Mark Carney in this role as Prime Minister, is he's going to end up saying a lot of things, but not actually doing them. He'll make this framework for it, but not actually implement or go through with it, which is going to be a huge problem. I mean, we've already seen a little bit of this with the whole budget situation. First, there wasn't going to be a budget. Now there is going to be a budget, but we're not quite sure when the budget is going to happen. And this kind of came back to bite Mark Carney in the butt, because yesterday in the House of Commons, they had an amendment put forward by Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives to make it so that they urge the Prime Minister to actually make the budget for the spring before the summer adjournment. Now, spoiler alert, they lost this vote. But just prior to this one, all of the parties voted together unanimously on the sub-amendment, which was actually to involve Indigenous people.
The
table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yeas pour 323, 323. Nays contre 0, aucun.
I declare the sub-amendment carried.
So quite a sight to see there. You see all of the MPs voting together on the sub-amendment. But then when it actually came to the real amendment that Andrew Scheer put forward, this was the end result.
That's about it, eh? Okay. The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yeas pour 166, 166. Nays contre 164, 164.
So carried. I declare the amendment as amended carried.
Now, this was obviously possible because the Conservatives, the NDP, the Bloc, and the Green Party, Elizabeth May, all voted together to have this amendment get pushed through, and the Liberals lost. Now, the unfortunate part is the wording of this amendment doesn't really say that he has to do this. It simply says, we urge the Prime Minister to include a firm commitment to present to Parliament an economic update or budget this spring before the House adjourns for the summer. So in no way are they saying he has to, it's just they are urging that he does. But this is coming off the heels of last week and now starting this week where they are pressuring them on the budget. I mean, last week we had Melissa Lantsman challenging Philippe Champagne, where Philippe Champagne came out and said one of the most ridiculous things. It's like this guy doesn't even know how to read anything.
Parading around the country and promising Canadians he'd, quote, spend less. But the guy who was supposed to give us fiscal restraint dropped an 8% spending hike, after promising he'd cap government spending at 2%. A big broken promise and a $500 billion spending bill without an actual budget. He called himself an Ottawa outsider, but he's picking up pretty quick on the ways of old Liberal Ottawa. Businesses and households across the country spend their money and live within their means. Why can't the Prime Minister do the same?
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. In fact, we have more good news, Mr. Speaker, for Canadians. In fact, Statistics Canada just announced this morning that the Canadian economy grew by 2.2% in the first quarter, Mr. Speaker. This is a plan that is working. This is a plan about building the strongest economy in the G7. This is about transforming our economy, Mr. Speaker. This is about an ambitious, a confident, and a prosperous Canada, Mr. Speaker. We will deliver for Canadians.
The amendment for Thornhill.
Now, normally I would give somebody the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they misspoke, but he said this repeatedly over and over again through that question period. That, again, somebody who's not financially savvy like myself, I go to StatsCan and I can even understand that he's misreading what is being reported in this recent report. It says the GDP increased at 0.5% in the first quarter. It's not 2.2 in the first quarter. That would be 2.2 annually over all 4 quarters. Because if you take 2.2 divided it by 4 quarters, you're getting 0.5%, which is what this is saying. And the reason that they're claiming that there was an increase was because of exports of goods drove the growth in the first quarter of 2025, followed by accumulations of business non-farm inventories. Higher imports and weak residential structure resale activity tempered overall growth in the first quarter, meaning a lot of businesses started overspending just to get an inventory because of the whole tariff situation. That's why it seemed like there was more movement in the GDP. But for him to continuously say 2.2 in the first quarter, we're doing fantastic, is very misleading to Canadians. And somebody who's not standing for this is actually one of the new Conservative MPs. And she has a financial background, and she just chastised these guys over and over again, especially Mark Carney, for being this economist that he so-called claims that he is.
The Prime Minister and his cabinet took the time to prepare a spending plan, but they did not make the time to prepare a plan to pay for it. Last week, I asked a simple question. With economic storm clouds moving in, how is it possible not to produce a budget this spring? Since then, this government presented the main estimates to Parliament to request nearly $500 billion, $486 billion to fund the government until next March. But they have not presented a budget, which is the very document that shows how it intends to pay for all of this spending. How irresponsible is that? Imagine walking into a bank for a mortgage. and you walk in with all your expenses, your car payments, your groceries, your student debt, but you refuse to provide evidence of your income. Any lender would say, come back when you have evidence of your income. As a finance professional of 14 years, I say the same to this Liberal government. Come back when you have a plan on how you're going to pay for all of this spending.
Now, one might say starting with a budget could help you show where this money is going to be coming from, how it's going to be allocated, all that good stuff. But the Liberals have made the excuse of, because of right now with Donald Trump and the economic uncertainty of things, they can't really make a budget. Well, she decides to go at them yet again and doubles down on why it's important to have a budget.
They say that economic conditions may change over the summer. Yes, there is an uncertain world. Yes, there are summits. Yes, there are shifting forecasts. That is exactly why we need a budget. When income is lost, you budget. When costs rise, you budget. When you want to change your circumstances, you budget. GDP is struggling. Our productivity is down. Our purchasing power is crumbling. Unemployment rate is rising. These are the fingerprints of 10 years of failed Liberal policies. If the Prime Minister and his Finance Minister want to be taken seriously as stewards of the economy, they need to do what every family, every business, and every government must do: put forward a budget.
Now, it seems like a pretty straightforward and simple answer to me, so let's actually see if Mark Carney and his government decides to go forward with this. But it wasn't just the Conservatives attacking them, because even yesterday, the Bloc Québécois took some shots at Stephen Guilbeault, who's no longer the environmental minister, but because he is the heritage minister, the Bloc decided to kind of spin things at him in regards to the pipelines that have been being talked about in these First Ministers meetings. Take a look.
While the prairies are burning, the premiers are in Saskatoon talking about dirty oil pipelines and abandoning environmental assessments. That's Canadian identity today, Mr. Speaker. A Liberal Prime Minister who talks to oil companies before talking to his provincial counterparts. Provinces that isolate Quebec to force it to accept a pipeline. All these people keep telling us that it's a matter of Canadian unity and of national interest. Does the Minister of Canadian Identity also believe that Canadian unity and the national interest mean building pipelines while the prairies burn?
Now, Stephen Guilbeault actually wasn't there to answer the question, so Melanie Joly stood up, but we're not going to listen to her reply, so don't worry. But I do find it rich that the Bloc Québécois is trying to make it seem like they care about any other province. These guys have said over and over again that no pipelines are going to be coming through. So they're trying to make it sound like if they do end up putting a pipeline through and not listening to Quebec, that they're actually going to be doing more environmental harm and that more fires potentially could be happening or environmental issues. A lot of these fires in the prairies, which is very unfortunate that's happening, are man-made, and nobody's talking about it. If you go to the Government of Manitoba's website, right here, it shows you the record since April 12th. Look how many causes it says here. That's human. Under investigation, human, natural. This one was natural in May 12th. Under investigation, human, natural, June 1st. Human. Like, all of these majority are human. And when you go to the summary of year to date, which again, this is on the Government of Manitoba's website, year to date, there's been 109 fires. Only 5 were naturally caused. The rest of the 99 were human caused. So for the Bloc Québécois to be going on this spiel about environmental safety and pipelines and that we shouldn't do it and this is a national unity is all horse crap. These guys just care about themselves. They want to get the equalization payments till the end of time and not actually contribute anything else and not help the actual country get oil and gas or whatever sort of energy from one side of the country to the other. These guys just think about themselves all the time. With that being said, let me know what you guys think about all this. Hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of your day. If you can, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.